Do you ever have those mornings where you sit in your car just a few extra minutes before walking into work? Not because you're tired or late or waiting for something, just sitting, staring out the windshield, thinking, how did I end up here? You're not alone. A lot of us, especially in our late 20s, 30s, and 40s, reach this strange point in our careers where everything looks okay from the outside. The job is stable. The paycheck lands on time. Maybe you've even got benefits, a decent title, and coworkers you like well enough. But something's missing. There's this quiet, gnawing feeling in the back of your mind that keeps whispering, is this it? And then comes the guilt. Because shouldn't you be grateful? Especially if others are struggling to find work, or if this is the job you once worked so hard to get. But here's the truth. Feeling stuck or uninspired in your job doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you human, especially in the thick of adulthood, when we're juggling bills, relationships, maybe kids, aging parents, and a million responsibilities. It's incredibly common to wake up one day and feel like your spark is gone. And the scariest part? Sometimes we don't even notice it's happening. So in this video, I want to talk to you, like really talk. No corporate lingo, no 5-step plans to become a CEO in 6 months. Just a real conversation about what it means to feel stuck, how it slowly drains our motivation, and what we can actually do about it. Because I've been there. And I know how heavy it can feel to carry that sense of numbness to work every day while life just keeps going. Let's start here. Maybe one of the biggest signs that you're stuck in a job that's slowly killing your motivation is that you've stopped caring, but no one can tell. You still show up on time. You reply to emails. You hit the deadlines. You're playing the part just fine. But inside, it's like you've checked out. You don't feel challenged. You don't feel curious. You're not thinking about the future. You're just thinking about the weekend. And listen, there's nothing wrong with living for Fridays now and then. But if every week feels like you're pushing a boulder uphill just to get to Saturday, that's a problem. Not with you, but with the way your career has evolved, or hasn't. When you stop caring, it often shows up in these subtle ways. You stop volunteering for projects. You don't bother sharing your ideas in meetings anymore. You tell yourself, what's the point? They won't listen anyway. That's not laziness. That's discouragement. And it's usually the result of being in a role or an environment where your contributions don't feel seen or valued anymore. Another sign? You're constantly fantasizing about doing anything else. You scroll job boards, not seriously looking, but just daydreaming. You wonder what it'd be like to open a little cafe or start freelancing or go back to school. It's like your mind is creating escape routes, but you don't act on them because, well, life. You've got a mortgage, kids, healthcare, or maybe you're supporting your parents. And the idea of starting over feels reckless or impossible. So you do what a lot of us do. You shelf the dream and stay where it's safe, even if it's slowly draining your energy. Here's something I've learned. When you constantly fantasize about leaving, it's not always about wanting a new job. It's about craving purpose, something that excites you again, something that makes you feel alive, even if it's just a small part of your day. And that brings me to another truth that's hard to admit. Sometimes you've outgrown the job that once fit you perfectly. We don't talk about this enough, but career fit isn't static. It changes because we change. Maybe you took your current job at 25 and it was exactly what you needed. It helped you build confidence, pay the bills, figure out who you are professionally. But now you're 35 or 42 or 29 with a completely different set of priorities. And yet, you're still showing up to a role that was meant for a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. That's not failure. That's growth. But growth without movement? That's where the friction starts. It's like trying to wear clothes from 10 years ago, not because of weight, but because they just don't feel right anymore. They're too tight in places you've expanded. One of the sneakiest signs of being stuck is when your job doesn't give you space to grow, professionally, creatively, or even emotionally. You might not be learning anything new. You're not being challenged in ways that excite you. Your brain is bored, and your soul is even more so. And here's what happens when we stay in that kind of job too long. It starts to affect everything else. Your energy dips. You come home irritated or withdrawn. You lose patience more quickly with your partner or your kids. You stop making time for hobbies or exercise. You might even start questioning your self-worth without realizing it. Because when your work feels meaningless, it's hard not to internalize that as I'm not doing enough, or worse, I'm not enough. If any of this is resonating with you, I just want you to know, you're not broken, you're not lazy, you're not ungrateful, you're just stuck. And stuck doesn't mean hopeless. Sometimes, the hardest part is simply recognizing that you've reached the end of a season and that it's time to start writing a new one. That doesn't always mean quitting your job tomorrow. It might mean having one honest conversation. It might mean exploring a side project or a training course. It might even mean shifting how you see your role rather than changing it altogether. But before any of that, you have to acknowledge that quiet voice inside that's been trying to get your attention. The one that keeps whispering, there has to be more than this. And I'm here to tell you, there is. Let's keep going. So maybe you've realized that you're stuck, not in a dramatic, falling apart kind of way, but in that slow, subtle, exhausting way that creeps in over time. And now the question is, what do you do with that? Because this is where a lot of us get stuck a second time. Not because we don't want change, but because we're scared of what change might cost. We've been taught that it's risky to start over, that stability is everything, that once you found something good enough, you should just be grateful and stay. But here's the thing, staying somewhere that drains your energy and chips away at your confidence is a cost too. It might not feel as dramatic as quitting a job or starting a business, but over time, it's just as expensive. It costs your joy, your creativity, your sense of purpose. One sign that your job is quietly taking a toll on you is that you're no longer proud of what you do. And I'm not talking about titles or prestige. I mean that deep down pride you feel when you know your work matters, when it stretches you, when it reflects the person you want to be. Maybe you used to feel that. Maybe there was a time you could talk about your job and light up a little. Now, when someone asks what you do, you hesitate. You give a short answer and quickly change the subject. Not because you're ashamed, but because the story doesn't feel like you anymore. I remember talking to a guy named Min a while ago. Early 40s, solid job in IT. Great at what he did, well-liked, decent salary. But he told me, every time my daughter asks me what I do at work, I kind of fake a smile. I say something like, Daddy helps people with computers, but it feels like I'm lying, because honestly, I don't even know what I'm helping anymore. That hit me, because when the people we love see us going through the motions, they notice. Even if they don't fully understand it, they feel the difference between someone who's alive inside and someone who's just surviving the day. Another sign you might be stuck? You're always on edge, even when nothing major is going wrong. Your patience is thinner. You get irritated more easily. You dread meetings, emails, and even small tasks that used to be manageable. It's like your body is in a constant low-grade state of burnout. Not the kind that sends you to the ER, but the kind that quietly erodes your spirit. You start to feel like you're always behind, even if you're keeping up. You go to bed tired, wake up tired, and start to wonder, is this just adulthood now? No. This isn't what life is supposed to feel like. This is what it feels like when your career and your inner self are no longer in alignment. When there's no room for creativity, no excitement, no sense of growth or contribution. Just repetition, just maintenance. I'm not saying you need to have some grand, world-changing mission every day, but you deserve to feel like what you do matters to someone, to yourself at the very least. So how do we start to get that spark back, especially when we can't afford to just walk away from our jobs tomorrow? Well, here's something that might surprise you. Often, the first shift isn't about changing the job. It's about reconnecting to the why. Now I know, find your why can feel like a fluffy cliche, but I'm not talking about some deep philosophical revelation. I'm talking about asking yourself, what part of my work used to make me feel proud? What part made me feel useful, or connected, or good at something? Sometimes, it's not that the job changed. It's that we've stopped doing the parts we enjoyed. We got promoted into management, and now we don't get to build or create. Or we took on so much admin that we never see the results of our work anymore. If you can identify even one small thing you miss, talking to clients, mentoring someone new, building a process, solving a specific kind of problem, you might be able to bring that back in small ways. And if not, then maybe it is time to explore new paths. But that doesn't have to mean blowing up your life. I know a woman who worked in marketing for nearly 15 years. She didn't hate it, but she also didn't love it anymore. She felt like she'd mastered it, and there was nothing new. She couldn't afford to quit, so instead, she started helping a nonprofit with their digital campaigns on weekends, just a few hours a month. She told me, for the first time in years, I felt excited again, like I was actually using my skills to help people. That small step gave her the energy and clarity she needed. 6 months later, she landed a new job at a mission-driven company. Not a huge leap, but a meaningful one. And that's what this is really about. Not always chasing the biggest job or the most money, but getting back to the version of yourself that feels awake again. If you're feeling lost, tired, or numb in your work, don't ignore it. That feeling is information. It's your inner compass trying to redirect you. You don't have to burn it all down, but you do have to listen. Because the longer you stay in a job that dims your light, the harder it becomes to remember what it ever felt like to shine. And I promise you, there is still light in you. It's not gone. It's just been buried under years of doing what you had to do. But now, maybe it's time to do what you want to do, or at least to start figuring out what that is. Let's talk about what that could look like. So maybe now you're starting to feel it. That small shift, that tiny flicker inside you that says, I don't have to stay stuck. That's not just motivation talking. That's clarity. And even though it doesn't solve everything overnight, it's the beginning of something powerful. Because once you recognize that your job no longer fits you, you also get to recognize something else. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to want more. And you're allowed to start small. I want to say this gently, especially if you've been feeling overwhelmed or even a little ashamed about where you are. Getting unstuck isn't about being brave enough to quit. It's about being honest enough to realign. And sometimes that means asking hard questions. Questions like, what kind of work gives me energy instead of stealing it? What skills do I miss using or want to develop more? Who do I admire, and what is it about their path that speaks to me? And maybe the hardest one, what version of myself am I trying to protect by staying here? That one hits deep. Because often, the reason we stay stuck is because there's a version of us that worked really hard to get to this point, and we feel guilty letting them down. Maybe it was 25-year-old you, desperate to land any job after graduating. Maybe it was the version of you that took the job for stability after having a child. Maybe it was the you that finally got a promotion after years of being overlooked. And now you're here, and it's not what you thought it would be. But here's the truth. You can honor who you were and still grow into someone new. You don't have to stay in a chapter just because you wrote it carefully. Let me share something from my own life. A few years ago, I hit that same wall. The job was fine, the team was fine, but I was losing pieces of myself every day. I remember sitting at my desk one afternoon, half listening to a meeting, and suddenly thinking, if I keep doing this for 5 more years, I'll forget who I am. And that scared me. Not because the job was bad, but because I had stopped dreaming. I had stopped imagining anything different. And the moment I realized that, I knew I had to do something, even if it was small. So I started with one uncomfortable conversation, then one online course, then one freelance project on the side. I didn't know exactly where it was leading, but I knew I needed movement. And slowly over time, I found myself again. Not by flipping my life upside down, but by choosing to listen to the part of me I'd been ignoring. I want you to do the same. Not because I think your job is terrible or because you're doing anything wrong, but because you deserve to feel alive again. You deserve to wake up with curiosity, to feel connected to what you do, to know that your energy is going towards something that reflects who you are now. So let's talk about what reigniting your career can actually look like in real life. Not just some motivational poster version. It might look like carving out 30 minutes a week to learn something new that excites you, something that isn't required by your job. It might look like reaching out to someone in a field you admire, not just to hear their story and ask questions, not to beg for a job, but to get inspired again. It might look like starting a side hustle, not to replace your income right away, but to reconnect with a skill or interest you've ignored for years. Or it might look like finally updating your resume, not because you're ready to leave tomorrow, but because you're ready to start imagining a different future. The path back to motivation isn't always big or dramatic. It's often quiet, gradual, personal, and it starts by choosing yourself, even in small moments. Because when you choose to care again, when you choose to believe that your energy matters, your growth matters, your voice matters, you begin to move again. That movement is everything. That's how we find momentum. That's how we shake off the fog of apathy and self-doubt. You don't have to wait until you have a perfect plan, or until you feel brave, or until everything lines up. You just have to decide that stuck isn't where your story ends. You are more than a title. You are more than a paycheck. You are more than what other people think of your career. You are capable of building a life that reflects your values, your purpose, and your full potential, even if it takes time. And if you're still unsure, if you're still doubting whether you have the right to want something more, let me remind you of this. Motivation isn't something you find. It's something you build by doing things that matter to you. Start with one small thing this week. One thing that makes you feel creative, useful, curious, you. That's it. That's the spark. And from there, who knows what might grow? I'd love to hear your story. Seriously, drop a comment below. Tell me if you've ever felt stuck like this and what you're thinking about doing next. Sometimes just writing it out helps more than you expect. If this video resonated with you, hit that like button so it reaches others who might be feeling the same way. And if you want more real-life advice, conversations, and encouragement to help you build a life you actually want to wake up to, subscribe. We're all figuring this out, but we don't have to do it alone. Your story isn't over. It's just turning the page. You're not stuck. You're just beginning again, with more wisdom this time. And that's powerful.